As the GB News debate rumbles on, I thought it helpful to jump on here and talk directly to some of your comments or thoughts or opinions or criticisms that you've put on my YouTube feed. So just for clarity, some people saying, well, Stein wasn't fired from GB News. It was Ofcom that got rid of him. And just from a factual point of view, correct, he was not fired from GB News. However, in order to return, he needed to sign a new contract. And in that contract was a clause that said, if he was found to have, so if there was an Ofcom complaint against him and that complaint was upheld, and then the channel was given a fine because of that Ofcom complaint, say £40,000, he would be required to pay the fines. So in his contract is a clause that says he would have to pay the fines for any Ofcom complaints that were upheld. And on a freelance basis, or if you're being paid per show, clearly that doesn't make financial sense. And what it does is incentivise those trying to silence you who know this about your contract, because all they have to do is rumble up Ofcom complaints, line those up at your door like buses, and then Mark Stein would be forever at risk of having debts to Ofcom that would ultimately make his position untenable in any which way. It's also a madness to think that a channel would have a presenter whom they love for the attention, the noise, the clicks, the views, the eyeballs. So they're happy to have all those things, but when it comes to something negative like an Ofcom fine, they want to offload that to Mark Stein. They want him to internalise that in an economic sense. And that's not really any sustainable model for any presenter. So just to make that point clear, it is not actually Ofcom that got rid of Mark Stein. It's a contract that is, by any definition, impossible for a presenter to accept unless you have more money than it matters to you, and you can just keep paying the fines like some Saudi in London parking on double yellow lines because the fines don't matter. That's that. Other people saying, yes, but some platform is better than no platform. And I have a whole bunch of agreement with this. So my whole comment on GB News on my video about, you know, I don't like to criticise our own side. Doesn't matter what my views, doesn't matter what I know at a personal level about something. I will hold those thoughts inside school, because outside school, my view is, if you're vaguely on our team, if people are supporting you, you're supporting people, it's all good. I've got no outside beef. However, I think you have to say that having a platform is better than no platform. It is better that there is some semblance of something than nothing. I was having this conversation the other day with someone on YouTube, and YouTube is a precise example that people have said, well, Katie, you're on YouTube. You can't say anything you want on YouTube, and that's absolutely correct. You can't. And is it arguably better to have some kind of platform where you say some kind of things, but recognising that you can't just go for it and say whatever you want? I think that is right. But I think what helps with YouTube is we all acknowledge at some level that you cannot just say anything you want. You cannot just let go on YouTube because they'll just remove your platform. So it's a question of, is some kind of platform better than no platform? And that's what people would say in support of GB News, right? They still have Neil Oliver. At least it's some kind of platform. And I understand that argument. I hear it, and absolutely applies to YouTube. But arguably here on YouTube, I'm not trying to pretend that I'm the great ambassador of free speech, because that is an anathema on YouTube. Everybody should know that by now. Other presenters, I've seen the behaviour of other presenters from GB News, and it's either absolute silence, pretend like Mark Stein hasn't been completely shafted, pretend like that contract isn't completely farcical, and say nothing. So that silence line, a line that I know very well when I've been ousted from Mail Online or LBC with presenters who knew me personally and held the line of silence rather than show any kind of support, because clearly their future lies with their employer, and to please their employer, they will be silent. And the other thing I've seen that's the self-preservation thing, or a sort of self-inoculation, is people saying, oh, you've heard this, some platform is better than no platform. It was Ofcom that got rid of him, and Mark Stein's a legend. So by repeating Mark Stein's a legend, it's a sort of self-inoculator. Well, yes, of course, Mark Stein is a very, very brilliant man, probably one of the finest thinkers there is. But just to say Mark Stein's a legend doesn't really get to the heart of him being offered a contract that's unworkable on a platform that you're paid by, where you do have some leverage to say, surely we can rework this, or have some kind of capacity for seeing that this shouldn't be allowed to stand. I don't think just saying Mark Stein's a legend, I see what that does. It buys you support, but it doesn't buy any action on the part of trying to get Mark Stein back or reinstated, or acknowledging that what was done to him was wrong. And that's kind of missing with the other presenters, for good reason, because of course they have to self-preserve. I also think on this point about self-preservation comes in lots of different ways. So it can come with people being silent, so they just hold their tongue. It can come by people being compliant, so say nothing, do nothing, keep going like nothing's happened. And self-preservation also comes in lots of other ways that I see, and none of them are very endearing. So, for example, some outspoken voices on our side, the side that wants the best for each other, will remove themselves from an event if I'm speaking, because they don't want any association with me that might harm their supporter base or their number of clicks or views. So they wouldn't even appear if they were supposed to be at an event, and I'm addressing this at someone specifically. They will remove their name from that event if I'm appearing even on a different day, because they don't want any of that darkness that comes from the silencing to be on them. And I wonder what that says. And it's a strange thing. Self-preservation is an ugly art. I think perhaps we can agree that. Some say that I don't show support for other channels that are trying their best to be open or have a freedom of speech. And I guess to that I would say that I try and do 4 podcasts a month or 4 videos a month appearing on other people's channels. And you may have caught those. And that's my way of supporting and drawing views and eyeballs and whatever to other people's channels. And obviously there's only so many of those I can do a month, but I'm just letting you know that's what I try and do. I also wanted to make, I think it's 2 more points. And the first is about generalised anger. So I think there is a general level of anger or frustration or upset, whatever the term is, about being silenced, about the fact there is no freedom of speech and hasn't been for over a decade in the UK, that there is no such thing as being able to speak your mind in the UK, and that actually in the UK, as I know, when the truth is identified as hate speech, then speaking truth becomes an arrestable offence, and I am a case in point of that, as are other of my peers that have tried to do the same. So the idea of freedom of speech in the UK has been long gone, but there is a generalised level of anger. And when people hear about GB News, this generalised anger comes up and it gets misdirected in all sorts of ways. I think that's just an acknowledgement that we feel anger, that we can no longer speak freely in our own country. And sometimes anger gets channeled wrongly, maybe targeting someone you don't need to target or whatever, or targeting someone who's on our own side. I mean, but that's not anyone's necessarily fault. That's just a sort of sense of anger that we can't say what we want anymore. And isn't that crazy when we have to pay taxes and pay for everyone else to be in this country? We can't say what we want anymore. That. And the last few points that I wanted to make are that we do all have different roles to play in this. So some people, like I would describe myself, can be right out there in the front of the thing, can be on the streets in Skegness, filming hotels, can be in Trafalgar Square and then thrust up on the stage, can be deported from here or bound from South Africa, or threatened with whatever I'm being threatened with at the moment, or threatened with beheading. That's my kind of role, and I'm very happy with it. I'm content with it. I have nothing to fear and nothing to lose because everything was taken already. My children have a different name. I've never once engaged with any of their schools. I don't own anything, and I am on extra time already, so I can be that role. Other people's role is to keep a kind of area where you can keep a conversation going, even though the platform that you are presenting is restricted in some way. Like GB News is massively restricted now and will be increasingly restricted and will lose its talent, even though on YouTube we're restricted. And that's a tacit, if not implicit, if not explicit acknowledgement that you can't say what you want on YouTube. That's a fact and has been for ages. But we all have different roles. Some people have the role of just watching stuff and supporting stuff, or like my supporters, turning up, buying tickets to come and see me live doing stand-up. Everybody has a different role to play. And what I really believe with all my heart is that we do not need to attack each other in the role that they're in. We don't need to criticize others in the role that they're in. Everybody has this role to play, and many platforms and many voices may be imperfect, but we are all imperfect and we are all weird. And then finally, this is probably a harder point, but I see some saying, first they came for Stein. People love this quote, right? First they came for Stein, but I was not Stein, so I said nothing. Or first they came for Stein, and then they came for Oliver. And of course they will. And I could name you the individuals from Board of Deputies who are behind the effort to take down Oliver. I could name you, I could probably show you a copy of the signed letter they'll be thrusting in front of anyone who will look at it. I could show you copies of the other organisations that they will be grouping with to make this happen. I could show, they've basically got this set, they're basically templates, and I've seen them all because they went to my bosses. And I could show you the names of those, it's literally from a playbook, and I have the playbook and I could show it to you. But the truth is, of course, it isn't that first they came for Stein. The truth is that first they came for someone else a very, very long time ago. And I'd argue that probably at the front end of that was Tommy. And the truth is that all those people who are making a big fuss now, because it's quite convenient, Mark Stein, it's kind of clean, it's on a mainstream-ish channel, and then they'll come for Neil Oliver. You're talking loudly now. But in the same way that in order to self-preserve, people won't turn up at an event if I'm even on a platform a day before, all of the people who are fronting up now to kind of support Mark Stein, which is brilliant, were not so quick to front up for Tommy, because the severity of his removal, the extreme nature of being utterly removed from everything, the reality of what happens when the matrix descends. Tate knows, I know, Tommy knows, Belfield knows, many other people out there know, is so extreme that no one wants to be anywhere near it. And all I say to that is no criticism, no complaint. But please know when you're tritely typing into Twitter that you still get to use, first they came for Stein. Well, no, they didn't. No, they didn't. First they came for Tommy. And you said nothing. And that's okay, because now you still have a platform and we need to preserve platforms. But it would be weak of me not to point out the glaring hypocrisy in it. And if I could say one last thing, it would be that perhaps what we're actually talking about here is the kind of, I don't know what it is, like uncut. It's kind of, we're against things that smell inauthentic. We don't like being lied to. We don't like pretense. We don't like performance. We don't like anything that doesn't feel authentic. And that seems to be the thing here with GB News. Presenting yourself as the ultimate free speech. This is free speech. We are the ambassadors of free speech. Look at us ripping up the rules, saying what we want, being who we want. That's not true. To say we're operating this platform, we're doing the best we can in a restricted and restrictive market. We have to make this financial model work. And here's our best shot at it. I think that's really honest. And I think that's the truth. But to stand and call your show, you know, uncensored or ripping it apart or no holes barred. And I think that's the problem, is presenting yourself as that when in reality, it's what your boss says, it's what Ofcom says and the Ofcom biatch says, and it's what this group says, and it's not wanting to upset the Board of Deputies and don't talk about Israel. That's the reality, is it's within a framework. I think if we can accept some platform is better than no platform, we can accept freedom of speech has not existed in the UK for 10 years or more. If we can accept that most ran away from the sort of darkness that some of us have seen in order to self-preserve. And as ugly as self-preservation is, it's also understandable, because I wouldn't wish what happened to me or Tommy or someone on anyone else. Not ever. Not even my worst enemies, in fact. If we can agree there is generalised anger, and sometimes that generalised anger can be channeled really ineffectively in the wrong directions. And perhaps if we can agree we shouldn't criticise our own side, we always need to be facing outwards, because there are much greater enemies against us than there are ever in our own team. And I think that would be a really splendid thing. Onwards we go to face down the darkness.